Welcome back to my channel, guys. Plot twist. I have a confession. I have been seeing somebody for a few months now, I guess about 3 months. And I knew I would eventually talk about it on my channel because, of course, it relates to my content, right? All these gay dating videos and gay dating stories. But I wanted to wait to see how it would evolve first. And also because I actually value the connection, I didn't want to blabble about it on my channel. Typically with the gay dating stories I share with you guys, it's like by that point it's already over anyway. Maybe it was a horrible first date. Maybe it's a guy I was casually seeing and then it fizzled out. So then I feel more comfortable to talk about it because it's not going to resurface, or it's not like I'm super close to the person. Or this one's a little bit different and I'm still navigating it with this guy. But I wanted to talk about it because it ties in a lot of the themes that we talk about on my channel and in the comments. Let me just start by saying, seeing this guy now for about 3 months, as embarrassing as it might sound, it's the most serious dating dynamic I've ever had. And when you meet somebody who is on a different level than others that you've dated, you realize the potential and you realize that you're dealing with a person who's unlike others you've encountered. The simplest way for me to say it is I feel like before him I've always encountered boys, and this guy is a man. Like, I've been dating a man. He's older than me, a little bit under a decade, so like 7 or 8 years older than me, which for me is perfect, by the way. I don't know how you guys feel about age differences. To me, age is just a number. You either connect with somebody or you don't. And it doesn't necessarily, of course, life experience comes with age, but I think maturity does not necessarily. And I think every human has different blind spots and vulnerabilities where every human has elements of life where they're more advanced and others where they're more regressed. And so you just connect with somebody at any given time of your life journey. And I just don't think age is that relevant. Last year, I was seeing an Italian guy who was only a few years younger than this guy that this video is about. And it's like day and night. I mean, again, it takes you meeting somebody who is a totally different kind of human to recognize, like, oh, that's what's not been working with all these other guys. It's a maturity thing. It's a communication thing. And so I say all that to say, it started off pretty amazing, like very wholesome, very traditional. There was a courtship and it was very refreshing. The first date that I had with this guy, by the way, I met him on an app. First date that I had with him, we spent 6 hours together. 6 hours at a bar. And we only had a few drinks. We had 3 drinks each. So it's not like we were wasted and just kept drinking and just being a drunken mess, an intoxicated mess. If you think about it, 3 drinks, that's 1 drink that you're slowly nursing for 2 hours. That's a lot of talking in between, and we just clicked. And he's cerebral, he's easy to talk to, he's charming, he's interesting, he's curious. Also, just I find him very attractive, again, in like a man way. He's what he's what the people call husband material. And I've never encountered this before. Again, I feel like in comparison to other guys I've dated, like the Italian guy I mentioned last year, I feel like I've always dated boys, and this guy is a man. The first few dates were fantastic. This was before the holidays at the time that I'm making this video. And what's interesting too is that first date, I remember the first 5 minutes, I thought, oh shit, like I don't think I'm on his level. Like, I don't know that I can offer to him what he could offer to me. He just felt more polished than me, more established than me. And I remember the first 5 minutes being, I never get nervous for a first date, or I get nervous about other things. I get nervous about job interviews. I'm not that person who gets nervous for a date. But I remember the first 5 minutes being like, oh shit, like I have to be the best version of myself because this guy's like a quality guy. I've never had that experience before on a date where I feel a pressure instantly of like, oh shit, like this one's different. Anyway, the date obviously went very well and we hung out many times after that. And again, it was just this wholesome, normal dynamic of how I think dating is supposed to be, you know? And how dating seems to be from my straight friends, by the way, the ones who are in long-term relationships. And I think this is like the normalcy that we all crave. But pretty early on, he revealed a bombshell, which is that he is new to all this. He is new to exploring with guys. And that the curiosity has always been there, the interest has always been there, but he has been basically playing the role of a straight guy his whole life. And he is one of now multiple guys that I've met over the past 5 years, I guess, who have mentioned that the pandemic was the wake-up call of spending all this time, ruminating and reflecting and realizing like, okay, this is what's happening. This is who I am or who I'm becoming. I'm actually not straight. The big bombshell there is he was married to a woman until the pandemic for a decade. And so maybe I'm naive because I've told this story to a few guys, gay friends, who were like, oh shit, like you should not be messing with him. He needs time to figure things out. This is going to bring you headaches, blah, blah, blah. But in my mind, I had no judgment towards this. I thought, wow, interesting journey, but he's not the first guy I've met who used to be married to a woman. He's not the first guy I've met who used to only date women. Like for me, this is not, as a gay person, this is not a novel thing to encounter a guy who's still figuring it out or still trying to explore his sexuality. Again, maybe that's naive of me to not think that would create other hurdles down the road, which I'll get into in a second. But bizarrely, I find myself always drawn to these guys who are discreet, bisexual, at worst, down low. And I've talked about this before on this channel that I think it's partially because these guys tend to be more traditional in the way they communicate, in the way they treat me, which is a mindfuck, right? Because you should be able to attract all of that with somebody who's happily, comfortably gay. But I find that that's usually not the case. And the fact that this guy is so wired for traditional courtship, I can't help but feel that that's because he's been trained by society of that's what you do with a woman. So he's now carrying that over into this experience with me. So anyway, we kept spending time together. It just kept evolving as a normal dating dynamic of like we would hang out every weekend. And for a guy who's still figuring it out, from that first date, he was already holding my hand in public. Like after the date, he walked me home. He walked me home the first 2 dates, which I thought was incredibly charming and sweet. I'm not used to that. So this has been very different for me. And again, when you realize, okay, this is a different level of a man, of a guy, of a dating situation, you want to preserve that, right? And you want to level up and match that potential. And then I would say after a handful of dates, he got very busy with work, and he also was moving. So he would tell me, hey, I'm really swamped, but just like thinking of you, checking in, which for me was fine. But eventually, 1 week of that turned into 2 weeks, and then it turned into 3 weeks. And before I knew it, it had been almost a month of just texting this guy, but not seeing him in real life. So then my insecurities started kicking in of like, wait a minute, what happened to this dynamic? Everything was going great, and then now I feel this distance. And at the end of the day, people do what they want to do, and they don't do the things they don't want to do, right? So it doesn't really matter how busy you are, right? At a certain point, it's like, oh, you just don't want to make the time to see this person, meaning to see me. So I got in my feelings about it. Valentine's Day, I went out to dinner by myself, which I don't recommend. And I got so bitter looking around at all these straight couples and envying, these like traditional wholesome dates, and thinking like, I'm seeing somebody, but he didn't even think to reach out on Valentine's Day, and I don't really know what's happening anymore. Suddenly this distance has come into it, and I got so in my head about it that the next day I was like, I need to rip off the Band-Aid. I'm just going to call him. Like, I just talk to me. Enough of this texting. We're not pen pals. Let's talk about it. He told me that it wasn't conscious and that he didn't realize it had been about a month and that he really had been busy, but subconsciously there was probably some truth to this distancing. And he confessed to me what my gay friends who I told about this whole thing had said, which was that he's still figuring it out, and that the idea of committing to somebody and getting serious is scary when his whole family doesn't even know that he's into guys, and his whole world otherwise is that of a straight man. And so as I'm listening to this, a part of me is of course empathetic to this journey that I can't fully relate to. But another part of me is like, well, then why did we go on dates at all? Like, if this isn't what you want, what are we even doing, right? Like, why would we go on dates? Why would you walk me home? And then you start to kind of spiral right into all this self-doubt. And of course, the more I talked, I think the more probably his wall came up, because it's this instinct of like, oh, now I'm feeling pressure. So it became a weird dynamic where then I almost feel crazy, like, should I have not taken this so seriously? Should I have been more casual? And that we just had a casual like friend with benefits or hookup buddy, and not invested so much to think this was like a serious quality guy. And so we both then kind of went into our own cocoons to reflect and think about what we actually want. And what I determined was that I was so disappointed that yet another dating dynamic had failed, and that what the straight people I see around me on a day like Valentine's Day, I carry this like envy for what seems to be intangible for me. It always feels intangible, and I've always linked it to being a gay person. That kind of love, that kind of affection is inaccessible. So I think the evolution with this guy sort of triggered that complex, right? But what I ultimately realized was, this is a quality guy. Am I willing to be so black and white to just cut off this connection completely because this guy disappointed me? And I realized I don't want to sacrifice that connection, which is rare for me. Typically, I'm very black and white. Even with friendships, it's like we're in each other's lives or we're not. I don't like gray area. I don't like confusion with people, uncertainty, especially with dating. I think it's just an unnecessary headache. But this guy is different. And this guy, to me feels like the kind of person and connection that you invest in. And so this was all sort of my inner monologue. And I guess he was having his own inner monologue, because days later he said, hey, can you come over for dinner? And he cooked dinner, and we ate, and then we talked about it, which, by the way, I think shows you what kind of person this is, that instead of just ghosting or disappearing like a lot of people would do, he had the respect towards me to want to have me over for dinner so we could talk like two adults. And this is what I was referring to earlier in the video, that it's like, this is a different kind of breed of man, right? This is a person with values. This is a person who wants to resolve conflict. This is a person with partnership skills, which is very alluring to me. So I was proud that we handled it like adults, and we talked about this dynamic, and he confessed. He was like, I think you're right. I think subconsciously I was pulling away because it was getting too real and too serious. And I just got divorced a handful of years ago to a woman. My family doesn't know that I'm into guys. My world doesn't know. Nobody in my life knows. I'm still figuring stuff out, and I'm just not ready. And so as I was listening to this, a part of me was, of course, empathetic, thinking I can't fully relate to his journey. I've never been married. I've never been into women. But another part of me was irritated, thinking like, then what are we doing? Why did we even meet? I realized, wait, you're trying to rationalize something that isn't rational. Like, you're trying to intellectualize and comprehend something that isn't worth, or it's not even something worth intellectualizing, because it's not a cerebral thing, it's a emotional thing, right? He's in this weird fear-based, anxiety-based time period that really is like his own coming out journey. And I realized it's actually kind of unfair of me to project my assumptions and my own interpretation, my own journey onto this guy who's going through it much later, basically. I realized as he was talking, I'm like, I like this guy. There's potential that I'll get my feelings more hurt if I stay connected to him. But this is a person worth investing in. And so despite typically being more black and white with relationships, I decided consciously, as he was telling me all this, I'm like, I'm okay with the gray area with this guy, because this guy is an exception to the rule, in my opinion. And it's just funny because, when I think about my female friends who are more sort of concrete with their expectations of dating, and, my female friends operate more on this timeline of the biological clock, right? I feel like in that situation, you would just end things with somebody because it's too messy, it's too confusing. But I thought, I don't have to follow these societal rules of you need to fit into this box. Like, in a sense, it's almost hypocritical for me to project that onto him, when my whole life story as a gay person, and many of you as well, I'm sure, your whole life story ends up being that there is no roadmap and that you're just figuring things out as you go and as you wish. And that's the beauty of, like, you get to choose your own path without a blueprint that heterosexual society has been so conditioned to follow step by step. So we basically ended this conversation on the note of, let's just be friends and explore that, and we can still explore this, but without constraints and without rules. And I feel like usually when you agree to just be friends with somebody, where there was some chemistry or romance or whatever, typically it's disingenuous, because one person will always want more or have wanted more, and that can lead to like bitterness, resentment. And I definitely carry a little bit of that towards him, but it's not his fault. It's me being triggered by this pattern of attracting men who are emotionally unavailable. And so listening to him give me his version of things and how he's feeling it made me realize to be mad at him is really to just be mad at myself, because there's a reason at this point, right? There must be a wall up with me that I'm also consistently attracting these guys who I end up feeling not totally wanted by. But interestingly, this request for friendship and just for an open sort of exploration is exactly what's been happening. And so we're still spending time together. And I have to say, we have so much fun together. Like, the chemistry is such a fantastic chemistry because it's somebody you can hang out with, but also have an intellectual conversation with, and there's an attraction there physically too. So it's like all the perfect ingredients for a great connection. And I've had to just accept, like, this isn't the fairy tale story that I wanted, and it's evolving differently than it started. But I would rather have a connection with somebody that I like and respect and admire than none at all. There's definitely still a bit of, like, my Achilles heel having been, struck by this whole thing, because a part of you naturally thinks, like, am I not good enough? Like, could I have done more? Could I have shown more that I can maybe bring partnership skills to the table that I feel he has? But what I've learned in this evolution with him, now that we're still hanging out, is that I actually get more affection and thoughtfulness from him and all those things when I don't try to control the dynamic. And this is something that I've always struggled with, and it's something I still struggle with, and it's definitely like a life theme for me that I'm sure many of you can relate to, which is this idea that people always talk about, that when you actually let go a little bit, life gets easier and you're more likely to get what you actually want by just letting things, by just sort of flowing with the current and not trying to, like, micromanage things and control things and control people. And so it's kind of ironic that now I'm actually sort of emotionally bowing out with him while still maintaining a connection. But I've had to like rewire my mindset about him to realize he's not the perfect guy for you if he doesn't want you 100%, or he's not ready for you. Like, if he's not ready for you or this, don't force it, and just enjoy your time with him without putting all your eggs in one basket. And so I'm finding that as I'm shifting that mindset, it's actually working in my favor, because then he feels less pressured. And then we just have this fun dynamic that I guess is like a friend with benefits thing. Anyway, this video is turning out to be very long. This is basically a therapy session, but my point is, it's interesting that I feel like I finally met somebody where I feel less crazy or like a failure when it comes to gay dating. And ironically, it hasn't worked out anyway, but there's a connection building there with him that is hard to put into a specific box or categorize, but I'm becoming okay with what that is. And I think that's an important sort of lesson. My connection with a guy doesn't have to look like what society has taught me to need or want. And I'm okay with that now. And maybe 6 months from now, I won't be okay with that anymore. Or maybe he'll meet somebody else, or maybe I'll meet somebody else. But for now, it's okay, because I enjoy being around this person, and that's actually the most important thing, right? To feel a bond with somebody in a way that's like exciting and different, right? It's novel. We'll see what happens. If I have any significant updates with this, I'll of course share with you guys. Curious if any of you have been in a situation like this. What I was mentioning earlier about, let's just be friends. Have you been in that situation, and did it actually lead to a friendship? Or do you also share the same kind of cynical take I have, that typically that doesn't work out? Catch you guys next time.